You're also editor-in-chief of StopNetRegulation.org. And I want to say a bit about that.
Yeah, that's Center for Individual Freedom publishes that website, and I'm its editor-in-chief, and the domain name is very apt. We work to stop the regulation of the Internet. That includes the aforementioned and much discussed December 21st power grab by the Federal Communications Commission.
All right, and we're going to get back to that after the next break. Michael Curtis.
Yes.
I have known you for a number of years, and you always have your hand and your mind into all kinds of interesting projects. You got anything on the horizon you're working with, and anything you want to tell us about?
Well, right now, Brent, a lot of my energy is going into something that I had just sort of peeked into when last time we were actually hanging out together. That is, I've been doing a lot of writing. I find myself, I've got 6 screenplays finished, and I find myself basically against the wall trying to find a good representation. I'm looking for some representation here. I'm looking for a publicist that is a member of the Writers Guild. And if anyone out there finds themselves in that particular condition, I would very much appreciate hearing from them, because I'm writing about a lot of things. Some science fiction. I've got one that's based on my experiences in Vietnam. I've got one that's about basically about what's going on right now. It's couched as a fiction, but I think your listeners would read it and find it very realistic to what they know is actually going on around them, which is an interesting vehicle.
So, how would someone out there get in touch with you?
Well, I created a email address. It's called basementscreenwriters@gmail.com. That's all one word, of course. Basement Screenwriters
at gmail.com. Art Brodsky is the Communications Director of Public Knowledge, correspondent with Communications Daily, with Congressional Quarterly. He's been around for a long time on Internet issues. Art, tell us about Public Knowledge.
Thanks, Brent. Public Knowledge is a group that will celebrate its 10th anniversary this year that works for basically protect consumers to have access to open networks like we're discussing here. And we have a whole other side of the house dealing with intellectual property issues to make sure that your rights are preserved and that there is not an overwhelming presence, not just from the government, but from entertainment companies, for example, that we want to make sure that it's still legal for you to have the concept of fair use. You shouldn't have to pay 4 or 5 times if you want to download a file to your iPod and put it on your laptop. We've been very vigilant in trying to make sure that government authorizes and exercises its power appropriately. In fact, we were the lead plaintiff, and we won a landmark case against the FCC when we thought it overreached its powers at the behest of the entertainment industry in 2006 with something called the broadcast flag, which would have given the entertainment industry, through the FCC, the power to tell you what you could or could not copy from your set-top box. So we're very consistent in making certain that consumers are protected, that government is limited, and that the law is upheld.
So how can people get in touch and how can people get involved?
You can go to our website, www.publicknowledge.org. You can there are all sorts of good buttons there to sign up to receive our alerts, to read our blog, which is a very well-read telecommunications blog. Certainly to donate money, we're not adverse to that at all. And if you see what you like, comment to us on our blog, shoot us a note, and we'd love to make you part of the discussion.
Excellent. www.publicknowledge.org. All right, now, net neutrality. Okay, starting with you, Art. Why can't the free market be left to handle the net? Why must we involve administrative government in the first place?
Well, let us make sure we're talking about the same thing. We're not talking about the net. We're talking about basic telecommunications services. And the reason the free market can't handle it is because there is not a free market. In an ideal world, you or I might have the choice of 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 internet service providers. If you remember, we want to emphasize my age again. 10 years ago, there were 5,000 internet service providers in this country. That's not the case now. If you're lucky, you have maybe 2 or 3 in your town. And in some rural areas, you may not have choices of any. So consumers are basically trapped. And it's an obligation then to make certain that those who are providing an essential public service provide it to all of the public.
Now, hang on a second there. Okay, it's perfectly natural that if you go into a store to buy something, you might not be able to get, say, the high end of that particular product. Maybe you're going into a mall jewelry store. You're not going to find a Tiffany diamond. You're simply not. It's not there. If you want a Tiffany diamond, you have to go someplace else, and only some people can afford to get a Tiffany diamond. Why doesn't the same concept apply with respect to the telecommunications companies and the Internet?
For 2 reasons. One, in any given mall, you may find 5 jewelry stores, some of which may have expensive diamonds, some not, in which case you go to another mall, or you look online, or you do any number of infinite choices you have before you. You don't have that choice in Internet service providers. It just simply does not exist. The wireless industry is not yet providing a robust enough service, and in fact the biggest wireless carriers are the ones that are the telephone companies anyway. So consumers are basically locked in to the companies that are providing what everyone agrees is an essential service. I mean, we're at the point now that this broadband high-speed service is not a luxury. It's a necessity.
No, it's not.
And I'll tell you one of the great stories I heard at a conference one time about an old boy who ran a machine shop up in the hills of Vermont. And he was crying for broadband service. Why? Because no one prints manuals anymore. And if he had to wait 2 days to download a manual, he couldn't do his job. And every time you get together with people who talk about how they're doing work in rural areas and underserved areas, they say, look, in order to apply for jobs, in order to do research, in order to do kids' homework, we need these services.
Okay.
That's why we are so hot on that. Okay,
now over to you, Seton. You said no, it is not necessary. Why not?
Because 96% of Americans have access to broadband, but only 65% have availed themselves of it, which means 33% of them don't think it's a necessity. So that's the first thing. The second thing he said was, and your analogy is exactly right. Right now, to have access to 95, 96%. And having only 2/3 of them availing themselves thereof means that it's not a necessity, and it certainly doesn't mean government should be involved. I do not think that what Art's not telling you is every time government gets involved to a greater degree, it raises the cost of entry into the arena, which means you're going to have less competition, less new entrants into the arena, not more. So the FCC doing what it did with net neutrality and the Title I power grab is to make it harder for competitors to enter the arena. It makes it so that only the big bad telcos that he is afraid of for no reason because they haven't done anything wrong are the only ones that can afford to provide internet access.
Now, but wait a minute. What about that young man in that rural community who cannot
move? Why is it our responsibility for where he chose to live? Move.
But his argument is that he can't even get the hard copy manuals, which is what he'd be happy to have.
Fine. Drive into town, go to the public library, and download it. Put it on a zip drive, print it out at a Kinko's, and you're fine. One of the underlying themes of what Art Brodsky and Public Knowledge are presenting is is that we are children that need to be babysat by the government. We are perfectly functional adults who can navigate themselves through the planet. To say that in 10 years it's become a necessity when 2/3 of the people that have access to it, or that 1/3 of the people that have access to it don't access it, is just patently absurd on its face.